The coffee, the stare, and the insult. It started with the coffee. The sun hadn't fully risen over downtown Los Angeles when Keanu Reeves stepped out of his modest black truck and walked into a small diner just off the freeway. He wore jeans, an old hoodie, and a calm look on his face. There was no security around him, no assistant, just him, quietly blending in like any other man trying to find some peace in a noisy world. He loved this little place. No one usually bothered him here. He'd come here for years whenever he needed a break from the noise of Hollywood or the pressure of big sets and cameras. The owners never made a fuss. The waitress, Maria, always served him with a smile and called him Mr. Kind Soul. Keanu never corrected her. But that morning felt different. As Keanu took a seat near the window, a police cruiser pulled up just outside. Two officers stepped out, one older and calm, the other young, tall, and tense. They entered the diner like they owned it, like they had something to prove. The younger officer, Officer Taylor, locked eyes with Keanu as they walked in. There was something hard in his gaze. Maria welcomed them and pointed them to the counter. But Taylor kept watching Keanu. Keanu nodded gently, trying to be polite. But Taylor didn't nod back. Instead, he smirked. "Well, look who it is," he said loudly as he slid onto his stool. "The movie star who plays tough guys on screen. Bet you'd fold into seconds if something real went down." Keanu blinked slowly. The diner went quiet. Maria stopped wiping a table. Even the other officer, a man named Sergeant Diaz, looked uncomfortable. Keanu didn't respond. He simply picked up his mug, sipped his coffee, and looked out the window. He didn't like conflict. He never had. He didn't feel the need to prove anything. But Officer Taylor kept going. "You know what's funny?" Taylor said, looking around. "Guys like that spend their whole lives pretending. They act like heroes, but they've never been in the dirt, never been in danger, never had to make a split-second choice that could mean life or death." Keanu placed his coffee down gently and looked over at Taylor. "I don't pretend," he said softly. "I just play characters. Real life's different. I know that." Taylor scoffed. "Yeah, and how would you know anything about real danger?" Keanu didn't answer. He just smiled, that quiet kind smile, and stood up to pay his bill. As he walked past the officers, he nodded to Diaz. "Have a safe day, Sergeant." Diaz nodded back, looking apologetic. But Taylor muttered just loud enough for Keanu to hear, "Hollywood fraud." Keanu paused for a second, but didn't look back. He stepped outside, got in his truck, and drove away. That night, the wind howled through the city streets. A storm was coming, the kind that made the air heavy and the alleys darker than usual. Keanu was at a charity event on the other side of town. It was quiet, low-key, just how he liked it. He gave a small speech about helping foster kids. He smiled. With volunteers, he never once mentioned what had happened that morning. But even as he smiled, his mind kept going back to that young officer's eyes, the anger, the bitterness, the need to prove something. Keanu had seen that look before on his own face years ago, when life had shattered and left him alone, when his best friend died, when he lost the woman he loved, when he sat in an empty apartment wondering if kindness was even real anymore. He had once been broken too, and that's why he didn't hate Taylor. He just felt sad for him. As the event wrapped up and Keanu stepped outside into the cold air, a loud sound tore through the night. It wasn't thunder. It was gunfire. Lots of it. Keanu froze for a second. He wasn't close, but he could hear the sharp cracks echoing just a few blocks away. People ducked and screamed. Someone shouted about a robbery, a hostage, a cop down. Keanu's single quotes as heart started pounding, not with fear, with purpose. His truck was parked nearby. He ran to it, started the engine, and turned toward the chaos. He didn't think twice. And that's where everything began to change, because what Keanu didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that the cop caught in the middle of that gunfire was Officer Taylor, the same man who had mocked him, insulted him, judged him, and Keanu Reeves was about to run into the fire for him. The alley of bullets and choicest sirens were deafening. As Keanu turned the corner in his truck, red and blue lights painted the buildings in flashing chaos. He slowed down, just enough to see what was happening. A small grocery store had been hit. Shattered glass sparkled under the streetlights like broken stars. The front doors were ripped open. People screamed from behind police tape. And just beyond the crowd, officers took cover behind their cruisers, shouting into radios. Their guns drawn and aimed at the store. Keanu pulled his truck to the side and jumped out. He didn't care about protocol. He didn't think about danger. He just ran toward the officers. A senior cop barked, "Sir, stay back. This is an active, I know." Keanu said breathlessly, "But is there someone inside?" The officer blinked, clearly recognizing him. Yes, a cop. Officer Taylor. He rushed in when he saw the suspect had a gun. Now he's stuck. "We've got no communication. We think he's hurt." Keanu's heart dropped. He could almost hear the echo of that morning's insult. Hollywood fraud. But he didn't feel anger. He only felt urgency. "Let me help," he said. The officer looked stunned. "Help? Are you kidding me? You're not trained for this." Keanu looked him in the eye. "I don't need a gun. Just tell me what you know." "Where is he?" The officer hesitated, then pointed. "Back alley entrance. Narrow." He was trying to circle in, but something went wrong. Keanu didn't wait. He turned and ran, his boots pounding the pavement. The alley was tight and cold. Trash cans rattled from the storm winds. The rain had begun. Light at first, but steady. It made the concrete slick. Keanu moved slowly, hugging the wall, listening carefully. Every sound felt louder in the silence. A distant groan, a soft metallic click, footsteps. He peeked around the dumpster, and there he was. Officer Taylor was down, bleeding from the leg, trying to drag himself behind a crate. His gun was out of reach, and standing just 10 feet away, a man with a shotgun paced nervously, yelling to no one. "I said I want a car. Now, or he dies." Keanu ducked back. His breath caught in his chest. He had no weapon, no protection, just his instincts. He looked up at the fire escape above him. A broken ladder hung halfway down. He didn't think twice. In one swift move, he leapt, grabbed the bottom rung, and pulled himself up. Every inch of metal creaked under his weight. He climbed silently, floor by floor, until he was right above the alley. Then, carefully, he lowered himself onto the roof. Crawling to the edge, looking down, he could see everything now. Taylor was pale, bleeding badly, and the suspect was shouting louder, more desperate. His hand gripped the shotgun like it was glued to his soul. Rage burned in his eyes. Keanu scanned the ground and saw a pile of bricks nearby, probably left from a past renovation. He didn't know what else to do. He picked one up, closed his eyes, and threw it with all the strength he had. It hit the dumpster hard. The suspect spun around, startled. "Who's there?" That's when Keanu dropped from the roof. He landed hard, rolled to soften the impact, and ran straight at the man. The suspect turned back to slow. Keanu slammed into him with everything he had. The shotgun flew to the side. The man punched wildly, but Keanu dodged and held him down, using his body weight to pin him. Taylor, bleeding, watched in disbelief as the man he'd mocked that morning risked his life to save him. Within seconds, more officers stormed in through the back. They surrounded them, pulled the suspect off Keanu, and began shouting orders. Keanu rolled off, panting, his hoodie soaked from rain and sweat. Taylor looked at him, eyes wide with pain and confusion. Why did you do that?" Keanu knelt beside him. "Because real heroes don't pick who they help." Taylor winced. "I'm sorry, man, I didn't know." Keanu gave him a half smile. "It's okay. Now let's get you out of here." Later, in the ambulance, as Taylor was being loaded in, he grabbed Keanu's hand. There was no pride left in his voice, just gratitude. "You're the real deal," he whispered. "I was wrong." Keanu nodded slowly. "We've all been wrong before." And as the doors closed and the rain turned into a downpour, Keanu looked up at the sky, thankful that he'd been there. Thankful that despite the insults, the doubt, the danger, he had listened to the voice in his heart. Because sometimes, saving someone isn't about being brave, it's about being good. And this was just the beginning. The hospital room and the weight of regret. Rain didn't stop for hours. It poured over the city like a blanket of sorrow, soaking everything, the buildings, the cars, the people standing under flickering street lamps, and the ghosts in there. Hearts. Keanu sat alone in the hospital waiting area. It was nearly empty. The smell of disinfectant clung to the air. A vending machine buzzed faintly in the corner, and the clock on the wall ticked like it had nothing better to do. He was tired. His back ached from the fall. His hands were scraped, and his hoodie was still wet. But none of that mattered. Officer Taylor was in surgery. They said the bullet had nicked an artery in his leg. He would survive, but it had been close, too close. Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. He stared at the floor like it held answers. Memories ran through his head, memories of people he had lost, of moments when he couldn't do anything, moments when he arrived too late. But not tonight. Tonight, he had done something, still. Something didn't feel finished. He heard footsteps. Turning slowly, he saw Sergeant Diaz walking down the hall. Toward him. He looked tired, older than before. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was something deeper. He sat beside Keanu without saying a word for a moment. Then he spoke quietly. "I didn't know you'd run in like that." Keanu shrugged. "Neither did I." Diaz chuckled once. "You saved his life. You didn't even hesitate." Keanu looked down. "He's a human being. That's enough reason." Diaz nodded. "It is. It should be." There was a pause. "He's a good kid," Diaz added. "Too proud. Too angry sometimes. Lost his dad in a shootout 2 years ago. Hasn't been the same since." Keanu's eyes softened. "That explains a lot. He thought you were just another rich actor pretending to know pain." Diaz said, "He didn't know your story. About your family. Your losses." Keanu smiled faintly. "He doesn't need to. People don't need to earn our help." Diaz sat back, arms crossed. "You know, most people talk about doing the right thing. You actually do it." Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he asked, "Can I see him when he wakes up?" "I'll make sure of it," Diaz said. It was morning when Taylor opened his eyes. The hospital room was quiet. White walls, soft beeping. A window half open to let in the cool breeze. He blinked a few times, looked around, and then noticed a figure sitting in the chair beside his bed. Keanu still in that same hoodie. Still looking like he hadn't slept. Taylor's single quotes S voice was rough. "You're really here?" Keanu nodded. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got kicked by a truck." Keanu gave a soft laugh. Taylor looked away, ashamed. "I was a jerk. You were hurting." Keanu replied gently, "Hurting people often do that." Taylor looked back at him, eyes glassy now. I judged you. I thought you were fake. I thought people like you didn't care about guys like me." Keanu leaned forward. "I've been in dark places too. I've felt pain that made me want to disappear. That morning, when you said what you said, it didn't hurt because it was cruel. It hurt because it reminded me of how I used to talk to myself." Taylor swallowed hard. "Why did you run in there?" "Because I could," Keanu whispered. "Because I've had enough moments in my life where I couldn't." The silence was heavy, but warm. "Thank you," Taylor said, voice breaking. Keanu stood slowly. "Rest, heal. We'll talk more when you're stronger." He turned to leave, but Taylor stopped him. "Keanu." He turned back. "You saved more than my life last night," Taylor said. "You saved whatever was left of the man I was trying to be." Keanu didn't speak. He just nodded and walked out of the room, his heart full of quiet emotion. As Keanu stepped into the sunlight, he looked up. For the first time in days, the clouds had parted. The city, broken and beautiful, breathed again. But deep inside, he knew something else was coming. Not just for Taylor. For him to. A new chapter. A challenge he didn't expect. And a decision that would change everything. Buried truths and a second. Keanu thought it was over. He thought the hospital visit would be the final page in a small chapter of his life. He had walked into Gunfire for someone who didn't believe in him, and somehow, that act of kindness had melted something cold inside Officer Taylor. Maybe that was enough. But life rarely turns the page so cleanly. 3 days later, Keanu was back on set. It was an indie film, a quiet, character-driven story about grief and forgiveness. He liked these roles more now. They didn't ask him to fight or run or look invincible. They asked him to feel, and Keanu had a lot inside him to feel. They were shooting in a quiet part of town. An abandoned train station turned into a sound stage. Keanu had just finished a difficult scene and was wiping sweat from his forehead when his phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. Unknown number. He usually didn't answer those, but something in his chest told him to pick up. Hello, a soft voice replied. Is this Keanu? Yes. Who's this? This is Officer Taylor's sister. My name is Emily. Keanu stood still. Is he all right? She hesitated. He's physically healing. Yes, but he's not okay. Keanu felt the words tighten in his chest. What do you mean? He doesn't sleep. He barely talks. He's replaying everything in his mind. He said you saw something in him, something no one else did. But now he's afraid he'll disappoint you. Keanu walked outside the building, where the wind hit his face. Where is he? At our family cabin. Our dad left it to us, he said. He needed to be alone, but I'm scared. He took his badge off the table and didn't say goodbye. Keanu's voice softened. Send me the address. The road to the cabin twisted through hills and forests, far from the city, far from sirens and traffic lights and the noise of life. Keanu drove in silence, only the sound of the engine, and his thoughts keeping him company. He had never really done this before, gone after someone he barely knew, but something about Taylor reminded him of a younger version of himself, the version that sat alone in his apartment after the accidents, after Jennifer, after his daughter. He knew what it felt like to be at the edge, and if he could stop Taylor from falling, even for a moment, he had to try. The sun was setting when he reached the cabin. It was small, built from dark wood, and stood beside a still lake that reflected the fading sky. Keanu parked and stepped out. The air was cold. He walked up the porch and knocked gently. No answer. He knocked again. Taylor, it's Keanu. Inside. There was a noise, then silence. A few seconds later, the door opened. Taylor stood there, looking thinner, tired, and full of confusion. What are you doing here? Keanu didn't flinch. You called out without saying the words. I came. Taylor stepped aside and let him in. The cabin was messy, dishes in the sink, a bottle half empty on the table, a folded letter that looked like it had been torn and rewritten a dozen times. Keanu didn't comment. He just sat down. Taylor stayed standing. I'm not like you. I can't be the guy who gets saved and suddenly changes. I thought I'd be okay after that night, but I'm not. Keanu leaned forward. You're not supposed to be okay. Not yet. Taylor's voice cracked. Then what do I do with all of this? Keanu looked him in the eye. You face it, piece by piece, with help, not alone. Taylor sank into a chair. I don't even know what help looks like. Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small worn notebook. This belonged to my sister, he said softly. She used to write things she was afraid to say out loud. After she passed, I started doing the same, writing what I couldn't speak. Taylor took it in his hands, surprised. You're giving this to me. I'm sharing it with you. Keanu said, because your story doesn't end in a hospital. It doesn't end in a cabin. And it doesn't end with regret. Taylor looked down, tears threatening his eyes. You think you're weak, Keanu continued. But strength isn't about being fearless. It's about showing up again, even when you're broken. The fire crackled in the silence between them. You showed up for me, Taylor whispered. Now you're showing up again. Keanu nodded. And you'll do the same for someone else one day. That's how we heal. They sat for hours. Talking, listening, not fixing everything, but starting something new. And when Keanu left the next morning, Taylor stood outside the cabin and saluted him, not like a soldier, but like a man honoring someone who had changed his life. But as Keanu drove away, a black car followed him from a distance. Unmarked, silent, watching. Because someone else had noticed what Keanu did that night, and they were about to reach out with an offer that would test everything he believed in. The invitation and the shadow behind the badgeite had been 2 weeks since Keanu had sat in that quiet cabin beside a wounded cop, sharing silence, stories, and something deeper than words. Taylor was healing now, not just his body, but the part of him that had been hidden beneath his badge, the part that had forgotten how to trust, how to ask for help, how to believe in people. Keanu still checked on him every other day. Just a message, sometimes a call. Nothing heavy, just enough to say, "I'm still here." But something else had begun. Ever since Keanu had driven down from the mountains that morning, he had noticed things. Cars parked too long across the street from his place. A man in a black suit near his film set, pretending to read a newspaper in the rain. To missed calls from a blocked number. Nothing threatening, but enough to keep his instincts alert. And then, one evening, it wasn't subtle anymore. He was returning from a bookstore when a black SUV pulled up behind his bike. It didn't speed up. It didn't honk. It just followed. Keanu turned onto a side road. The SUV followed. He parked in a public lot and walked toward a cafe. The SUV pulled into. Before he could reach the door, a tall man in a gray coat stepped out of the vehicle and spoke calmly. "Mr. Reeves, we'd like a word." Keanu paused, eyes scanning the street. There were people around. He wasn't afraid, he just didn't like surprises. "Who are you?" he asked. "Federal, but this isn't official," the man replied. "Can we sit somewhere quiet?" Keanu stared for a moment, then nodded. They sat in a corner booth inside the cafe. The man ordered tea, didn't touch it, and leaned in. "We saw what you did, the footage, the risk you took to save that officer." Keanu's expression stayed still. "I didn't do it for footage. We know. That's why we're here." Keanu raised an eyebrow. The man continued. "We've been monitoring corruption within certain law enforcement groups across the city. There's a network, small, hidden, dangerous. They recruit angry young officers, like Taylor once was, and they push them to act outside the law." Keanu's breath slowed. "We think Taylor was on their radar," the man said. "But you changed his direction, pulled him out before they got him fully in." Keanu said nothing, but inside, he was shaking. "Now they're watching you," the man added, "and we think they might see you as a problem, or worse, a target." Keanu leaned forward. "So what do you want from me?" The man slid a file across the table, unmarked. "No names, just images. We want your help, not to go undercover, not to play cop, but to be what you already are, someone who people trust, someone who can go where we can't, especially now that these men are starting to blend into normal spaces, into city council, private security firms, even entertainment." Keanu looked through the file. Pictures of men in suits, smiling for cameras. One of them had been at a fundraiser Keanu attended months ago. The man spoke softly. "We need someone they don't see coming." Keanu exhaled. He had played hundreds of roles in his life: assassins, lovers, warriors, wanderers, but never one like this, never one that blurred the line between acting and living. "You're asking me to walk into the shadows," Keanu said. "You already did," the agent replied. "When you ran into that alley. This just continues it." Keanu closed the file slowly. He remembered Taylor's face in that alley, the fear, the blood, the helplessness. He remembered holding back tears in that hospital room. He remembered the cabin, the firelight, and the words Taylor had whispered. "You saved more than my life." He had saved a soul, and now maybe there were more souls that needed saving. He stood up, heart steady. "I'll think about it." The man didn't smile, just nodded. "That's all we ask." The next night, Keanu sat on the roof of his home, alone under the stars. A soft breeze passed through the trees, and the city lights blinked like tired eyes below. He opened the notebook again, the one he'd shared with Taylor. And he wrote something new. "Sometimes life waits until you've been broken to offer you a choice, not between good and bad, but between silence and courage. Tonight, I choose courage." He closed the notebook and looked out over the city. He had made his decision. But just as he stood up to go inside, his phone buzzed. A message from Taylor. It said, "I think they're following me too. Something's not right. Meet me tomorrow." Keanu's eyes narrowed. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The final stand in the alley of truth. Morning sky was heavy with clouds, like the city itself was holding its breath. Keanu arrived at the meeting spot early, a quiet parking lot near a train overpass, half forgotten by the world. It was the kind of place that echoed with old footsteps and whispered secrets. Taylor had chosen it carefully. Keanu waited by his truck, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the streets. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was tense, sharp. Even the wind felt like it was watching. Then he heard it. Footsteps. He turned. Taylor was walking toward him, hoodie pulled up, a limp still in his step, but his eyes clear. "Thanks for coming," Taylor said, voice low. Keanu nodded. "You said something's not right." Taylor looked around, checking shadows. "I think I messed up. They came to me again. A guy I used to know from the academy. He wasn't asking, he was threatening. He said if I ever talked about certain names, I'd regret it." Keanu's voice was calm. "You talked to the agent?" Taylor shook his head. "I didn't trust anyone else, just you." Keanu sighed. "All right, let's figure this out together." They started walking, moving toward a nearby alley where Taylor had spotted the man trailing him. They were going to find out if the threat was real. Keanu didn't carry a weapon, he never did. But what he had was something deeper. Presence. Clarity. Instinct. They reached the alley and stopped. It was too quiet. Then a car screeched around the corner behind them. Black. Unmarked. No plates. "Move." Keanu shouted, pulling Taylor behind a dumpster just as the first shot rang out. The sound of a silenced pistol cracked through the air. Keanu didn't flinch. He peeked out, eyes locked onto the shooter. One man. Black gloves. Precise. Trained. This wasn't a warning. This was a hit. Taylor pulled out his own gun. "I got one bullet left," he whispered. "I was afraid to reload in case they were watching." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "Then make it count." He stood up slowly, hands raised. "Don't shoot," he said calmly. "You don't want to do this." The shooter hesitated. Keanu took a step forward. "You're just following orders. But deep down, you know this isn't justice, it's fear, it's silence, and it ends today." The shooter raised his gun again. Crack. Taylor fired. The man dropped, not dead, hit in the leg. Enough to stop him. Keanu rushed forward, kicked the gun away, and pinned the shooter down. "Who sent you?" Keanu demanded. The man groaned, defiant. "You think this ends with me?" Keanu leaned in, voice like steel. "No, but it starts with you." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the cops. Keanu stood up, breathing hard. Taylor leaned against the wall, pale but steady. "You all right?" Keanu asked. Taylor nodded. "You?" Keanu smiled softly. "Been through worse." Later that day, the federal agent met them at a secure site. "We got the name," the agent said, flipping through files. "Your shooter gave up everything. This network goes deeper than we feared. Cops, businessmen, even a few politicians. But now we've got something we didn't have before." "Proof?" Taylor asked. "No," the agent said. "Hope. Thanks to both of you." Keanu didn't respond. He just looked at Taylor. "You don't owe me anything," he said. Taylor shook his head. "You're wrong. I owe you everything." Weeks passed. The story of Keanu's bravery leaked to the public not because he told anyone, but because someone from the force let it slip. Headlines called him a hero. Fans praised his courage. But Keanu didn't change. He still drove the same truck. Still ate at the same diner. Still drank coffee like it was the only thing holding him together on quiet mornings. Maria at the diner gave him a free cup and a knowing smile. "I always knew you were more than a movie star." Keanu smiled. "I'm just a man, trying to do something good." One day, Keanu visited Taylor at the academy. Taylor had returned not as a student, but as a speaker. He was training young recruits now, not just on how to shoot or drive, but how to feel, how to listen, how to care. Keanu stood in the back of the room, watching. One cadet raised his hand. "What do you do when someone mocks you? When they say you're not strong enough?" Taylor looked across the room and caught Keanu's eyes. He smiled. "You wait," Taylor said. "You wait until they're the ones who need saving, and then you save them anyway." That night, Keanu returned home. He sat on his roof again, notebook in hand, the city stretching beneath him like an unfinished script. He wrote, "Kindness isn't loud. It doesn't wear medals. It doesn't ask for thanks. It just shows up and stays, even when no one believes in it." And then he closed the book. Not because the story was over, but because he had lived it. And the world, broken as it was, still had people worth fighting for.